Hey everyone, in this episode I will show you how I made this epic Battle of Hoth diorama from scratch. Do you remember when Star Wars wasn't all about visuals or politics?
Average farm remembers.
There was a time when it had heart and soul and incest. I absolutely loved this movie as a kid. I even have this Echo base model kit that my father dug up for me from my pile of old toys. I was planning to make this huge project for a few years now, and in November of 2022 I started modeling the minis. I have made all the vehicles, turrets, beasts and people in Blender. It was quite hard to decide what scale should I make it. I didn't want huge walkers or microscopic people. I think I have found the sweet spot, 10mm, which is roughly 1 to 160 scale. As you will see on the finished diorama, I wanted a lot of action. A condensed battlefield with stories told through sub-scenes. So I had a lot of modeling to do. I posed the minis and sculpted the details based on how much attention will the given character get. This was the longest part of the process and the least interesting, so I won't bore you with the details, but basically what I did was to take the default cube and turned it into this intricate layout. Then I just had to summon the minis into the physical reality and remove all those supports. The bigger pieces were okay, but the problem started with the 10mm people, and there were like 80 of them. Thank you, supports, you were incredibly supportive.
See you in hell!
There were holes on the bigger parts to reduce suction during printing that I had to fill with green stuff, and there were others that needed to be cut, because somehow all the AT-STs were printed with only one window eye, thanks to a failed boolean operation in Blender. So I used the scalpel and this tiny chisel to carve them out. I also filled the holes on the snowspeeders, but later I drilled them again to push in the plexiglass rods. The AT-ATs were easier to print in parts, so I assembled them using super glue. And this was the point when I noticed I glued the wrong leg there. I simply broke it off, filled the gaps and glued them in the right place. Little did I know that none of the legs will fit the uneven terrain. More about that later. I thought painting will be easy on this project, mostly airbrushing, washes and a few details to pick.
I don't know where you get your delusions, laser brain.
Bless you. By the way, this is how sausage is made. After a totally pointless zenithal highlight, I airbrushed the walkers with grey. Then I painted everything black that needed to be black. Also did some more useful zenithal on the people too. The snowtroopers are mostly white, so I could just airbrush them white. I painted some parts of the rebels' clothes beige, the face is a light tan, and the glass is a light blue. I gave them a bath of dark wash to bring back the shadows. But they felt too dark, so I dry brushed them lightly with white. Basically I did the same with the troopers. I painted the tauntauns to different shades of brown and dry brushed them also with white. This was the part when I had to paint all the guns black. I think we can just skip that. The wampa was relatively easy. Except few dark details, I painted the whole thing to a pale yellow and applied the usual wash and dry brush. Okay, we have to speed it up a little from now on, so I will just show the main steps of the painting process. I used the wash to darken the recesses on the snowspeeders. I had to bring the whites back a little bit and painted these panels red. I made a dark to light blue gradient and a little highlight in the upper left corners of the windows. Wash, dry brush. Wash, panel lining, more wash, more panel lining, dry brush. Painting the rust was more interesting, but I managed to make it without getting too excited. I painted a darker and a lighter orangish layer, because it's not so flat this way. When it was too much, I used cotton swabs to wipe off the excess. I did the same with the AT-ATs, trying to figure it out where water would go and cause corrosion. And again, I painted some spots with the orange rust color. Where the effects were too aggressive, I repainted the original grey color in a splotchy manner. After that, I cut off one of the AT-ST slide blaster cannons from the side of its head and dry brushed yellow on as object source lighting, because there will be an explosion of a cannon hit. I cut a base for the diorama from an 18mm MDF board. Or at least I wanted, but it pinched on the riving knife. It didn't seem warped, so I tried from the other side. Stuck again. Finally, I finished it with the bandsaw. With my router, I cut a pretty profile on the edges of the board. I also cut 4mm birch plywood to support the hillside on the diorama. For this, I had to make a groove to fit in. Like this. The terrain should be easy peasy, right? It's just snow everywhere. So I was like...
Won't take long.
Spoiler alert, it took long. But at least I didn't end up like this. Anyway, I cut the base for the terrain from XPS foam on my bandsaw, but this time in the cozy warmth of the house instead of the cold shed. I used silicone glue to stick the XPS to the board.
I like the sound of that.
Really? How about fingernails on chalkboard? I aligned the visible ends of the foam strips, so later I had less work with the filler. After that, I clamped the whole thing to the desk until the glue set. Since I had a digital plan, I sketched the main parts of the diorama on the foam, then blocked out the terrain. It was too blocky, so I shaped it with a utility knife. I also cut the echo base entrance. I know R2, it's too small, but it was too late when I noticed it. To reduce the amount of garbage I make, I glued back these offcuts to places where it was too blocky or needed mess. This way I have to use less modeling compound, which makes the diorama heavier. With the scalpel, I have cut the cave entrance for the wampa attack scene, then glued some pine bark here and there as rocks to peek out from under the snow. It was time to make the modeling compound from paper, water, plaster of Paris and PVA glue. After laying down patches of ground, I decided to examine the base entrance more closely. Please bend over and cuff. It turned out that my grinded paper is too rough for this terrain, so for the next batch I just stored the cheap one-layer toilet paper into the cup. Now that was a great mix to work with. It went down nice and smooth. I sculpted a bunch of unnecessary details into the ground because I didn't exactly know how it would affect the snow on it. After I finished, it looked like this. At this point I made an even surface on the sides with the wood filler and sanded it smooth. Okay, enough sanding porn. Please don't do a search for that. When the modeling compound fully dried, I made a little surgery. Wait, maybe you will see better from this angle. Well, here's an audio description of what's happening.
A man's hand is chipping off pieces of terrain with a metal tool to form a crater.
There is the crater, but it just doesn't want to show itself anyway. I have painted the sides and parts that would possibly be visible under the snow black. After that, I airbrushed zenithal highlight on the rocks and painted the flat parts white in case they will show through. I also gave the sides a matte finish. I never made explosions, so I had to make a number of versions before I got it right. I cut a short piece of thick fishing line, covered it in super glue and wrapped in cotton wool, coated it with solvent-based adhesive like uhu glue and let it dry. I also made some thin strips on a parchment paper. All of them was glued together like an albino hedgehog. Later I found that if the stick doesn't taper, it looks more like snow blast, so I added some of them too. For the smoke, I dipped cotton wool into grey acrylic ink, dried it, scratched, gave it a good brushing and haircut. It also needed a little shaping and it was ready to spray with fixative. I painted the bottom yellow, a touch of red in the middle and black on the top. The fiery blast was made exactly the same like the smoke, yellow, red and black. The snow effect was made using baking soda, white paint, water and PVA glue.
Now, you must eat.
It's a forbidden treat, Yoda. You really shouldn't eat that. I massaged the paste into the terrain's nooks and crannies with a special attention to the trenches and the base entrance. Also made the blasted/melted part next to the crater. More adventures to come with this hillside, so hang on. By the way, if you made it so far into this video, chances are that you don't find my content repulsive. So please leave a comment and a like, and if you want to see me building more epic pop cultural dioramas, subscribe and turn on the notifications. Also, can you please share this video with your 1000 best friends? Thank you for the support. Now back to the video. I soaked the board in this PVA water isopropyl mix and sprinkled baking soda on everything. This will stick to the wet paste and makes a more fluffy looking surface. The excess was just blown off with airbrush. For some parts like the trenches, I sculpted details into the snow effect. I wanted a few ice slabs, and making them was
All too easy.
The recipe is as follows. Few drops of cyanoacrylate, a pinch of baking soda and a hint of love. Let them sit on parchment paper for 0 seconds, flip it, then add baking soda to the other side too. Break into pieces.
Good food. Good.
Now you just keep an eye on Yoda so he can't eat it. I carefully examined the board and identified the places where ice slabs would form. I couldn't help myself, I felt like I needed to cut.
I hope you know what you're doing.
Not really.
He's as clumsy as he is stupid.
Later, I tried to glue back the pieces, but this is how it went, maybe because...
There is no try.
Anyway, it was good enough for a destroyed turret, so I put one of the smokes into it. After that, I drilled the holes in the snowspeeders that I filled earlier, so I can put the holding rods there. That AT-ST needed its explosion, so it got that. I assembled these don't-know-whats like this. This was after another very unpleasant moment, when I noticed that all these legs needed to be removed and glued back in angles they would fit the ground. Time has arrived to glue the turrets in place. I used everything I got to blend them into the terrain. I tell you, it's not easy to glue anything on top of that powdery surface.
Be careful.
Let's just say, it wasn't the first time. Or the last. Somehow I managed to blend all the cannons, turrets and whatevers to the terrain, then made a mount for the crashed snowspeeder to slip into. Shaped it a little and blended it with more baking soda. From my small rock collection, I have chosen a few appropriate sizes, painted them black and glued them into the crater. Or at least I tried. Maybe the try was the problem.
Dear oh dear.
Similarly to the ice slabs, I made a pair of icicles and put them into the Wampa cave entrance. Not much left, only glue 74 minis plus vehicles and miscellaneous items to their places. Here I have to pause a little bit. At this point, I thought there was only the big reveal left. But as few days passed, I hated more and more every time I looked at this almost fully covered hillside. So I grabbed my trusty old tiny chisel and carved a good portion of the snow effects off. I was going for a natural looking pattern and rebuild a layer of snow in a patchy fashion. And now here you go, the Battle of Hoth diorama that I made for over a year.
Most impressive.
Tell me in the comments what do you like about this diorama, or what would you do differently? Do you think it worth the 1 year of work? Also, is there something you would like to see more of the build process in the coming videos? Please like, share and subscribe, it really helps a lot. Thanks for watching and I hope to see you in the next one. Cheers!